Have you seen Connor McDavid's socks?
Yeah.
They're missing toes. Like they're literal not. They're not socks.
It's gross.
They're like heel huggers. This episode is presented by Moen Flow. Athletes tend to be a little quirky, and there's certainly no shortage of stories about eccentricities throughout hockey history. What's unique about the sport is that, more than maybe any other, fans really match the player's freak. There's a long list of items being thrown onto the ice that we can demystify, but there's also the act of fans themselves getting thrown into the action. Join us for a walk on the weird side, featuring rats, octopi, and Jaromir Jagr peanut butter. He's Greg, I'm Arda. Today we're talking about superstitions in hockey, which is going to be a very boring episode because hockey players are anything but superstitious.
They're very well adjusted. No, the reason they're superstitious is because they're creatures of habit. You know, every game they're taping their stick, they're putting on their uniform a certain way, the skates must be laced perfectly, everything has to be within routine, and that goes to their nap time, their practice time. They are creatures of habit, and when you're a creature of habit, Arda, it's natural that superstition will creep into that routine.
As I understand it, the very first hockey superstition, based on my limited but vast research, was don't touch the Stanley Cup.
Right.
If you haven't won the cup, you don't get to touch the cup. Even alumni don't touch the Stanley Cup.
Because then you can't win the cup.
Yes.
That's the idea. Is if you touch the cup, then you can't then win the cup. And it gets so freaky that parents, hockey parents that believe their children are blessed with the gene to become NHL superstars, will not let their children touch the cup when they're children, because then 30 years later, they'll be unable to win it.
That's right. That's right. And the kid will point back to that moment, that one picture at the Hockey Hall of Fame with the finger on the Stanley Cup as the reason they did not win the Stanley Cup in 2057 against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Mom and Dad, you sacrificed all your time and your money to make me an NHL player, but because you didn't let me not touch the cup, it's the reason I've never won it.
Exactly. My favorite instance of this, by the way, is when Mark Messier had the Stanley Cup in his hands in our studio, chasing after PK Subban, who didn't win the Stanley Cup. Mark Messier won 6, and he's like this, literally chasing, running after PK, and PK had to run up the stairs to avoid Messier. It was one of the funniest things of the entire season.
It's a real cross-vampire situation with PK in the cup.
Yeah.
Right.
What's your favorite hockey player superstition?
All right, so my favorite one of all time, 1975, it's the New York Islanders. The Islanders beat the hated New York Rangers in the first round of the playoffs at Madison Square Garden. They go on to face the Pittsburgh Penguins in the next round, and their luck is running out. They're down 3-0 in the series, Arda. They're like, what went wrong? What's changed? They realized when they beat the Rangers at MSG, the circus was in town. And when the circus is in town back in the 70s, that means the elephants are in town. So the Islanders, in their twisted hockey logic, decided, well, the reason we're not playing well now is because we're not surrounded by the wafting smell of elephant dung. So they dispatched somebody from the team to go back to MSG, collect elephant poo, put it in a bag, and then they bring the bag of elephant poo on the road with them in their series against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then rally from a 3-0 deficit to win the series.
So clearly it worked.
Right, clearly it worked until the next round.
Why are you laughing?
Well, then they were eliminated in the next round. But yeah, the odoriferous emanation of elephant poo was the reason why they struggled against the Penguins.
So did they bring the elephant poo for the final?
I mean, don't you think they did?
Probably.
Yeah, but
luck ran out,
luck
right?
ran
Yeah.
out. Well, by that time, I'm sure it wasn't as pungent. That must be the reason why.
Arguably, the most superstitious NHL player today is Sidney Crosby.
Without question.
He has his pregame ritual at home, especially with tracing the McDonald's M with a puck. He's been doing that for years. But also, him and Connor McDavid, they rarely, if ever, change equipment.
Right.
And this is one that I'm not a professional athlete, but I don't know if I can get behind that. Like some hockey players, and I'm counting McDavid and Crosby in this, have used the same equipment for decades.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Why? That's beyond superstition. That's like...
Well, I wonder if one being one of the greatest players of all time and the other being the greatest player of his generation might trump your germophobia a little bit.
Yeah,
Like, clearly
maybe.
they've figured something out that you haven't.
I guess so. Doesn't matter if it doesn't fit properly. Doesn't matter if the straps are falling off. Doesn't matter if it's ripped. Like, have you seen Connor McDavid's socks?
Yeah.
They're missing toes. Like, they're literal not. They're not socks.
It's
they're,
gross.
They're like heel huggers.
The other thing about Crosby, too, that I thought you were going to mention is the numerology part of it. The
Yes.
87. The 87 for the birthday, the birth year. The 87 on the jersey.
87, 87. Yeah.
Right. The 87 with every, like, contract that he gets. That's the cap hit. Like, that's the freakiest part of Crosby's superstitions, I think, is the fact that 87 is rule. That's a guy who definitely is turning the doorknob 87 times before he leaves the room, right?
Or 8.7 times. Like,
one-
he's
the last one
perfected.
is just-
Yeah, perfected it at 0.7. Like,
that's
0.6, 0.7.
That's the beautiful thing about superstition is, like, you have to rationalize it. 87 times, that's a little bit too lengthy. 8.7 times, it'll still satisfy the superstition, but also get me out of the room pretty quickly. Well, while we're on the topic of superstitions, let's go to Jaromir Jagr and his explanation for his superstition involving peanut butter.
I was injured for a month, and any doctor don't know what to do with me. Then I get the peanut butter, I wrap my groin, and all of a sudden I start playing again, just like that.
So this has secret healing powers as well as
That's right,
being edible.
that's right.
So hockey players are superstitious. What about hockey media? Do you have any superstitions?
Well, I had one as a fan. For a while when I was a kid, I believed that drinking pink lemonade before a New Jersey Devils game would determine whether or not they would win or lose that game. Like, I had to do it. Like, I had to go chug a thing of pink lemonade before watching a Devils game, because if I didn't, they'd definitely lose. Now, did they go undefeated? No, they'd lose all the time. It was nonsense. But still, it made sense to me that the one time I did it and they won, that was a repeatable feat if I drank the pink lemonade.
Okay, so you didn't change colors at all? It was always pink lemonade?
No, I mean, I probably will have diabetes at some point because of all the pink lemonade that I consumed when I was a kid. But that being said, I was convinced it had some impact on the team on the ice.
No. Speaking of fans, they are very much a part of this whole hockey superstition ecosystem. They love throwing things on the ice. If you're in Florida, you're throwing plastic rats. If you're in Detroit, you're throwing an actual octopus. But there's been some great examples of things being thrown on the ice by fans.
Yeah, my favorite's the catfish in Nashville. It's such a weird, wacky, wonderful tradition. The Red Wings are to blame for all this dead animal thrown on the ice stuff, without question. And the catfish was a reaction to Red Wings fans throwing the octopus on the ice because Nashville and Detroit early on were quite big rivals. Bob Wolf, guy who owned a bar on Broadway, he's a musician. He claims he threw the first catfish at a Predators game back in 1999, and he said he did it as a response to Red Wings fans throwing octopi. Now, over the years, Arda, the catfish tradition has taken on a life of its own. They wrap the catfish in Predators jerseys. In fact, one wore a Mike Fisher jersey on the ice when somebody threw it. They put little cowboy hats on the catfish. One time, they actually stuck a baby octopus in the mouth of the catfish before throwing it on the ice in sort of a reigniting of the Nashville-Detroit rivalry. So, again, catfish on the ice, not everybody's cup of tea. The one thing I do love about it, Arda, is you've got to find a way to get the catfish in the arena to throw it on the ice. So there is an intricate amount of wrapping in plastic and taping to legs that happens to Predators fans to make sure they can smuggle the catfish into the game.
That fan that brings the catfish into the arena, you have to think it's taped to their leg for, what, 3, 4, 5 hours?
Yeah.
Right? So how long after that do you think they smell like catfish?
I don't know, but here's what I hope. I hope they have lower bowl tickets. Because if you're on the upper deck and you're attempting the catfish toss and I have lower bowl tickets, no thanks.
Bang! Right in the bag, right there. All right, let's talk fan rituals that don't involve throwing things on the ice. I got a couple. The Traveling Jagrs were a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
They were paying homage to Jaromir Jagr at the tail end of his career. It was a group of buddies that would go from arena to arena just watching Jaromir Jagr play, and they would be dressed up in different Jagr eras.
Yeah, the Jagr Ayres tour, if you will.
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, outstanding. So shout out to them. Also, I do love, and I know this definitely happens at Islanders games at UBS Arena, but I'm sure it happens across the league as well, the section of referees. So it's basically one section where they're all dressed in stripes, and they applaud when there's a coach's challenge or an offside review or a referee makes a good call.
Right.
Whenever the whistle is blown, you see that section clapping.
I love that tradition too because most games involve a referee's name and the word sucks following it at some point. So to have the kind of support like that in the stands, I think is important. My favorite tradition also in the stands, Arda, is the whiteout in Winnipeg. Now, this is a tradition that started because the Calgary Flames fans all wore red to playoff games in Calgary. It was called the Sea of Red. C for Calgary. Isn't that clever? So Winnipeg was like, how do we combat this when they had a playoff series against them in the late 1980s? They thought, our colors are red, white, and blue. Maybe we'll wear those to the game. They're like, no, that's dumb. Calgary's red. Why would we wear red? They're like, what about just blue and white? And then someone said, you're overcomplicating things. Just wear white. So Winnipeg Jets home games, from the old incarnation of the team to the new incarnation of the team, playoff games, everybody in the stands wears white. It's one of the more striking visuals, I think, in all of hockey, and by far my favorite fan tradition.
Yeah, the white looks so good on broadcast, but in the building as well. And now you've seen plenty of teams pick one color, to your point, and try and make the entire arena in a playoff game that color.
And frankly, perfect for Winnipeg, a stark, frozen landscape, barren of all activity in the winter. I always felt it was representative of that.
They don't call it winter peg for nothing. So this isn't a superstition, more something that is unique to hockey, and that is the emergency backup goaltender. Always present, rarely gets called into action, but when they do, it's always an event and a moment that hockey fans remember. The most famous example, of course, is David Ayres, the Leafs Zamboni driver, and he would practice with the team that got called into action against the Leafs and beat the Leafs, and now that's part of hockey fan and Maple Leaf lore, which is going to live on forever.
The fact that a Zamboni driver beat them in the game.
Yes, exactly. My favorite example, though, this isn't exactly an emergency backup goaltender, but he was signed on a emergency basis by the Edmonton Oilers because they needed a backup goalie.
Right.
His name is Matt Berlin. He's a university student at the University of Alberta, and he plays goalie for their team. He got signed by the Oilers, and in that game, the Oilers were up big. I think it was 7-2 or 7-3, and the last 90 seconds of the game, apparently, Connor McDavid went to the coach and said, hey, let's put the kid in so he can experience an NHL game.
Awesome.
Like, can you imagine one day you're studying in class or you're playing for your college team, and then the next day, the best player in the league is saying, hey, this is your moment. He gets bombarded by the team after the game. Like, that's just one of the reasons why hockey's awesome.
It's awesome. Nothing would warm my heart more than the best player in the league saying, we're so far ahead right now, this kid can't screw it up. My favorite is Scott Foster, 2018. He's a Chicago accountant. He's been an emergency backup goalie for the Blackhawks for a few seasons, and he was a college hockey player at Western Michigan. He finally gets his chance in the third period of a game, but there's 14 minutes left. They're playing the Winnipeg Jets. The Blackhawks are up, but there's a good chance the Jets could rally in this game against this total amateur. Except he becomes the first emergency goalie to make a save in a game. Not only does he make that save, he makes 7 saves in total. Plays really well, and the Blackhawks win. He gets mobbed. There's a celebration in the locker room. The greatest thing about that is the way that Foster handled it afterwards, which is to say that, it was kind of a moment where everybody who sits in the stands and imagines whether they can play in the NHL one day, well, look at me. I achieved the goal. Keep at it, everybody. One day you'll go from the beer league to the National Hockey League.
Even if it's just for one period of one game.
Yeah.
All right, Wysh, let's propose something completely new or something that you can't believe doesn't already exist in the world of hockey, superstition, ritual, or otherwise.
Okay.
Mine is very quick.
All right.
The New York Rangers need a mascot.
They don't have one.
They need one.
They need one.
Every every team in sports needs a mascot. I don't have enough time to talk about how important mascots are to sports and fan bases and team game presentation. All I'm saying is the New York Rangers, time to get a mascot.
So here's the question. Do you go the Ranger route on that one, or do you go the New York-centric route on that one? like New York inspired mascot or like a guy in a Rangers hat?
No.
Or do you go with, like, animal?
You have to go full mascot in a full costume. Look, the Mets are having a race right now with the 5 boroughs.
Right.
Okay? Each costume is representing the 5 boroughs. I'm sure the Rangers can think of something.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. What do you got?
I like it. Mine is simple. So the Montreal Canadiens are a team that prides itself on decades of amazing goaltending, whether it was Ken Dryden or Patrick Waugh or Carey Price. They also are a city that prides themselves, although misguidedly, according to this New Yorker, on the quality of their bagels. So great goaltending, fantastic bagels. You get a shutout in a Montreal Canadiens home game. All the fans throw bagels on the ice. There's a bagel on the scoreboard, a bagel on the ice. A perfect fan tradition.
I honestly thought you were going to say poutine.
No.
And that would have been the messiest fan tradition in history.
What am I, some kind of sadist for the arena
Yes,
workers? No,
yes.
I'm never going to do that to the good people who clean the ice in Montreal.
Can you imagine just gravy flying in the air?
Bagels are sweepable.
Smothering the
Bagels
ice.
are easily collected. They're like hats, except they're bagels.
We also would never besmirch poutine like that.
No, we would not.
This episode is presented by Mow and Flow, because water should stay on the ice, not in your walls.